Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're cracking open a case file on a molecule you've definitely heard of, but one that's seriously misunderstood: cholesterol. We're going to investigate why it gets such a bad rap, break down the science of what happens when it gets out of balance, a condition called dyslipidemia, and uncover the playbook for keeping it all under control.
All right, here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll uncover cholesterol's secret identity. Then, we'll line up the good guys and the bad guys that are hanging out in your arteries. After that, we'll profile the risk factors, look at the #1 tool for solving the case, statins, and check out the rest of the arsenal before wrapping up with a lifelong game plan.
Okay, let's start at the very beginning. Before we go and slap a villain label on cholesterol, we really need to understand what this stuff is and what it's even doing in our bodies in the first place.
So, here's the million-dollar question. Is cholesterol a friend or a foe? And the answer is, well, it's both. See, on its own, cholesterol is absolutely essential. Our bodies need it to build cells. The real issue, the thing that causes all the trouble, isn't the cholesterol itself. It's all about how it gets chauffeured around your body.
Right, so cholesterol can't just float through your blood by itself. It needs a ride. And that's where these things called lipoproteins come in. Just think of them as these little transport ships. They carry cargo, cholesterol, and another fat called triglycerides. And here's the key. It's the type of ship that determines if it's helping you out or causing a whole lot of harm. So let's bring in our lineup of suspects. Now that we know it's really about the transport ships, not just the cargo, we can start to get a really clear picture of which ones are the good guys and which ones are the villains clogging up your arteries.
In any good investigation, you got to separate the heroes from the villains, right? The villains here are called pro-atherogenic, which is just a fancy way of saying they promote plaque, that gunk that clogs your arteries. And as you can see, there's a whole crew of them, with the most famous one being LDL. On the other side, the solo hero is anti-atherogenic. It fights plaque. That's HDL, and it basically acts like a garbage truck hauling excess cholesterol away.
Now, this chart breaks down the job of each of these little transport ships. Some are mostly carrying triglycerides, but the main one you gotta watch is LDL, low-density lipid protein. Its whole job is to deliver cholesterol out to your body's cells. But when there's too much LDL, it gets sloppy and starts dropping its cargo in the wrong places, like the walls of your arteries. HDL, high-density lipoprotein, does the exact opposite. It's the cleanup crew, swooping in to grab extra cholesterol and take it back to the liver to be safely dealt with.
So, who's most likely to have this bad balance of lipoproteins? This next part of our investigation is all about building a risk profile, identifying the things that put a person squarely in the hot seat.
So who needs to be on the lookout? Well, the official guidelines give us some solid clues. Screening is generally recommended for men and women over 40. But honestly, that's just a starting point. If you have any other risk factors, you should get checked, no matter your age. And in families with a really strong history of heart disease, even kids might need to be screened.
When we build out a risk profile, we're looking for co-conspirators. And the usual suspects are all here. You know, a family history of heart trouble, diabetes, high blood pressure, smoking. But other things, like chronic kidney disease or obesity, they basically create the perfect crime scene for bad cholesterol to do its damage, and that really raises the stakes.
And get this, the plot thickens. This list shows how some conditions you would never think are related are actually huge clues. Things like chronic inflammation from diseases like IBD, or conditions like HIV, and even erectile dysfunction. They're all connected to this cholesterol imbalance. It's just a wild reminder of how everything in our bodies is interconnected.
Okay, so we've identified the risks. Now we can get to the primary tool investigators use to get this whole situation under control. The first, and by far the most common line of defense, is a class of drugs called statins.
So how do these things work? It's a pretty brilliant three-step move. First, they go into your liver and block the main enzyme that makes cholesterol. This makes the liver's internal supply drop. And in response, the liver cells get hungry for cholesterol, so they build more LDL receptors on their surface to literally snatch the bad LDL cholesterol right out of your bloodstream. It's genius. This slick mechanism makes statins the absolute go-to for both primary prevention, that's stopping a first heart attack before it even happens, and for secondary prevention, for folks who have unfortunately already had one. And they don't just do one thing. They hammer down the bad LDL, they help lower triglycerides, and they even give the good HDL a little boost. But of course, no solution is perfect.
The most common side effects people talk about with statins have to do with muscles. It can be anything from simple aches and pains to more serious issues. The liver can also be affected, and this is exactly why doctors keep a really close eye with blood tests and check in on how you're feeling, especially when you're just starting out.
But statins can't always close the case by themselves. Sometimes that LDL is just really stubborn, or maybe other fats are the main problem. So let's look at the specialized units, the backup that can be called in for support.
All right, next up is ezetimibe. This one has a totally different game plan. Instead of blocking cholesterol production inside your liver, it works in your gut. It's like a bouncer at the door of your small intestine, stopping cholesterol from your food from even getting absorbed. And when you pair it with a statin, you've got a seriously powerful 1-2 punch.
And then you have the real specialists, fibrates. Their main target isn't LDL cholesterol at all. It's those other fats we talked about, triglycerides. When triglyceride levels get way too high, they can cause a really painful inflammation of the pancreas called pancreatitis. That's the specific emergency where fibrates get called in to save the day.
Think of this chart as our big evidence board for the whole case. It shows you exactly what each tool in the arsenal does. I mean, look at the massive impact statins have on LDL. Then you see how fibrates and niacin are the heavy hitters for triglycerides and for boosting the good HDL. But check out this crucial clue here. See resins? They can actually increase triglycerides. This just goes to show why a doctor has to pick exactly the right tool for each person's specific situation.
So how do we pull all this evidence together for the long haul? Because managing dyslipidemia isn't a one-and-done deal. It is all about lifelong surveillance and having a solid strategy.
The management plan is kind of built like a pyramid. The foundation, the base of everything, is always lifestyle. We're talking diet, exercise, the works. On top of that, doctors use these risk calculators to figure out a person's 10-year odds of having a heart attack. But for the people at the very top of that pyramid, the ones who are already high risk because of things like diabetes or known heart disease, well, for them, statin therapy is pretty much a go from the start.
So what's the end game? What's the target we're aiming for? For most people at risk, the big goal is to get that bad LDL cholesterol level below 2.0 millimoles per liter. The other option is to slash your starting LDL number in half. Hitting one of those two goals is basically considered case closed, at least for that phase of the treatment.
So at the end of the day, your cholesterol test, it's not just some numbers on a page. It's the latest chapter in your body's ongoing story. And now that you've seen all the evidence, the culprits, the risks, and the tools to solve the case, the biggest question is the one right there on the screen. What's the next chapter going to be? The investigation is now in your hands.